I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting in the town of Saugeen Shores and extend a welcome to everyone in the chambers this evening. The first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so. Undeclared, then we have the next item is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we have nothing under that. We have one delegation this evening. It's Jeff Carver. He's here on behalf of the Port Elgin BIA to give us an update. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Bart. So I'd like to start off, I guess the first item on my list of things is the redevelopment of Coulter Plaza, a project that was approved and budgeted for in the last budget here at the municipality. And it's an exciting time. This is something that we've been talking about as a group, as an organization, for many years. So finally seeing that come to fruition is exciting. With my deputation tonight, I have included the work that has been done on the project, and I'd like to start first by recognizing Frank Burrows and Len Perdue. Without them, we would not be where we are with this project, and the work they've done behind the scenes is pretty fantastic, and they should be commended for that. Recently, Frank, myself, Mr. Perdue, Bart Toby, and Jane Jagielowski met to finalize the plans. It was at that point that the realization was raised by Jane Jagielowski that we may fall slightly over budget on the project based on the design that we've put together. For that reason, I'd like to come to council tonight offering a solution for that small amount. In the way I will be presenting a motion at tomorrow night's BIA board meeting, suggesting that the BIA is able to help fund this project in the same manner that we funded the new streetlights that now populate the downtown. So if anyone should have any questions, I'd be happy at the end of this deputation to answer those. The next item is to discuss the summer projects and events that we have on the docket. We're starting the summer off with a request, obviously, for a road closure and an event to coincide with the Canada 150 celebration. We're bringing back the Poutine Fest that we hosted and started a couple of years ago. Incredibly successful. We're hoping to bring together local restaurants, producers, as well as microbreweries, wineries, that sort of thing, to create a kickoff event on July 1st at Coulter Plaza and help start the march or the travels of the flag from downtown Port Elgin into Southampton. The next item is to discuss the farmers market. This year we are excited again and hoping to expand. We also want to bring to council a proposal for the fees, and in an effort to help assist offset costs by the municipality, offer the same amount that we paid last year to help offset those road closure, staffing costs, and things of that nature. And we hope that council is keen to accept that same amount. As well, I'd like to also announce that tonight our treasurer, Kathy Fenton, and our coordinator, Laura McGuinness, are in Owen Sound accepting an award from the Grey Bruce Agricultural and Culinary Association. The Port Elgin Farmers Market has won the award for marketing and networking. So just another kind of notch on our belt and recognition of a great event. So that was an exciting little detail we just found out about a couple days ago. And the last item here is the Farm to Table dinner. This will be the second year that we'll be holding this. Its first year was incredibly successful, and the event went off without a hitch. We were able to raise $5,000 for beautification of the downtown and different projects that we're very excited to reinvest. This year is especially exciting. We have a partner moving forward with this event. 7 Acres Farm has jumped on board as the title sponsor of the event and is offering up a very substantial $2,500 to help offset costs. which means that we'll be able to put more money into downtown beautification projects. They will also be making a weekly appearance at our farmers market to help educate the public about what they're doing, obviously promote their business. So if I could, I would like to introduce John Fowler. He is the CEO of Supreme and founder of 7 Acres Farm, and I'd like to invite him, with your permission, up here to say just a couple words.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor Smith, thank you for having me, and the council as well. As Jeff said, my name is John Fowler. I'm the CEO of Supreme Pharmaceuticals, which is the wholly owned parent of 7 Acres down in Tiverton. I was also one of the founders of that business back in 2013. For me, medical cannabis has been something I pursued for approximately a decade, working a number of varieties, actually starting out to grow medical cannabis for a friend of mine's mom. I lived with them for a while, and it was one of the chores. It was interesting when you're a teenager, you have to make your bed, you have to, wash the dishes, and you have to water Diane's plants every other day. So for me, this was interesting because it was a plant I saw provide a lot of benefit to people, but I saw the economics were always in the black market, always in the underworld, dangerous, unregulated, things of that nature. Myself, I parted ways with the plant. I became a lawyer in Toronto after going to the University of Ottawa for law school. Really, in a nutshell, made my mom pretty happy doing that. And then, I think unintentionally, Mr. Harper granted cannabis entrepreneurs like myself a real gift. In an effort to control the black market and really restrict cannabis, he made Canada a world leader in regulated supply chain cannabis, particularly on medical cannabis side. I partnered with a few folks in Toronto. There was 5 of us, and we looked around for where was the right place to make a business. And for us, we landed on Tiverton. And one of the things we were told by folks in Kincardine, folks up here in Saugeen, and other ways around, is this is a great place to do business. This is a strong entrepreneurial community. It's a hardworking agricultural community at its roots, and that there'll be a lot of people to help us get where we need to go. And what I can say is since 2014, that's absolutely been the case. We've been blessed to be in Bruce County. We've been blessed to be in this part of Ontario. And I think in general, I'm excited about the fact that we have an opportunity to give back to a community that's really embraced us with open arms. Since we started, as I said, in 2014, we started with 5 of us. We're now sitting here in 2017. We've employing about 55 people in Kincardine, in Tiverton, rather. We've invested about $10 million into the expansion project, and we're only just getting started. I'm sure people have seen on the news, Mr. Trudeau is making substantial changes to our laws, both on the medical side and on the recreational side, and as a result, we've really upped our expansion planning, which is part of why we've also increased our efforts to interact with the community and make sure we're known as a solid member of this community, both the business community and the community at large. Over the next roughly year, up until June of 2018, we expect to invest an additional $50 to $60 million in our facility in Kincardine. Where possible, we use local trades, we use local labor where we can. But most importantly, I think most excitingly, is our staff of 50, which we doubled last year, will take to over 120 by the end of this year, and likely over 300 by July of 2017 or 2018. To succeed in that, really, you can't do it on your own. It takes a community. It takes a group of people that are willing to come and work hard. It's not an easy business to be in, particularly for our employees. And the commitment we made back, a commitment I've made at council in Kincardine, and when I've been to some of the county governments, I apologize it took me so long to make it here. We're committed to a living wage and for a career for the farmers that come to work with us, for the people that work in our sanitation department, for everyone who works with 7 Acres. I'm proud to say we're actually one of the highest paying employers in our industry in Canada, in an industry where generally jobs are minimum wage or even below there with foreign workers. We're happy to employ locally here in Bruce County at a minimum rate. The lowest paid employees in our facility are earning $17 an hour with a pretty reasonable benefits package as well. That's what we can provide to this community pre-revenue. We haven't started that, and it's something we intend to build on over time. Just to conclude, I'm not here for any specific request. I do thank Jeff for giving me the opportunity to address council and the opportunity to allow us to invest in what he's doing. I think it's pretty special what's been happening here over the last few years. And just reiterate our support for this community. We're proudly rooted here in Bruce County. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be here for some time. I'm sure there's going to be times when I need to come and ask for a favor or ask for some assistance. I hope I can have you here at that time. And in the interim, if there's anything I can do, if there's any questions your constituents have about the business or anything like that, I'm always available. You're welcome to give me a call or an email. We can always come back and present to council. Really, I'm in your hands on that. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you to Jeff.
Thank you for that, John, and thank you for letting John speak here tonight. The BIA has been kind of a little bit different and innovating in many different ways over the last number of years, and the partnership and the opportunity to work with a new company, a new business like this that is only going to be expanding. It was an exciting one, and we're very much looking forward to working with John and 7 Acres. So with that, I would like to say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and if anyone has any questions for myself or John, I'm sure that we'll both be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jeff and John. Thank you very much. Questions? Start with Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually I did a tour of the facility back in, I guess, the spring of 2015 when you were offering that to councillors, and one of the things that impressed me the most was the security involved with the registration of the plants, and I just thought it'd be an interesting point for the public to know that something I didn't realize before we talked about it on the tour. If you could just briefly explain what, in terms of the fact that I think each plant is registered and tracked, and would you mind?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So, you know, when I mentioned the changes in the leadership position Canada has in regulated supply chain, there's nowhere in the world that's approaching cannabis the way this country has chosen to, I think, quite appropriately. So we have a lot of security and a lot of regulatory requirements. I'm not sure if this makes sense from a policy perspective. We're actually more regulated than opioid producers in terms of the level of detail and the reconciliation of our inventories. If anyone has been or would like to come, what you'll see is no matter how many plants we're cultivating, and eventually we'll be doing, you know, a few 100,000 to 1 million of these at a time, each one has an RFID tag on it. That tag can say exactly where in the facility it is. It can tell us who's worked on the plant, and it links everything through our computer systems, through our cameras, and everything like that. What that means is, for public safety reasons, anyone using the product, there's impeccable traceability in the event of any sort of recall or health concern, and then obviously it's a huge preventatory step from any sort of diversion or trafficking, if you will. In addition, you know, while we're on it, if I may, there's a huge commitment to security. So the law requires heavy security measures. Anyone who's driven by the greenhouse has probably noticed we've done some upgrades around the outside. That carries through. So we have dozens of cameras. We'll have hundreds by the time we're done, almost like a casino. It covers every section. So whenever someone's working with cannabis, they're on camera. And that way we can make sure that this always goes into the legal market. Right now, purely medical under doctor prescription. You know, in the future through regulated supply chain here in the province of Ontario and elsewhere. And it's something that I'm very proud that we've been able to achieve a great record of compliance with the federal regulator, and we look forward to working with the provinces and maybe one day the municipality as well on that. Thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
I'd like to change gears here a little bit and talk back about the big paragraph that Jeff alluded to in his presentation as well, that we have an opportunity here to, so I'd like to know through you, Mr. Mayor, and through David maybe, we're talking about an increasing cost, and we're talking about the ability, I think that as a member of council, I'm quite willing and open to suggest I would vote in favor of the new financial model if that's what it's going to take to get this project completed. There's still hidden text, and I would like to maintain that open and transparent approach and say what is the time. There's a reference to potential timing issues and budgetary issues. So we've spoken to the budgetary issues. The timing issues are probably, in my mind, they might be centered around, will this be able to be completed in time for a grand opening in use before July 1st? I think that was the original intent. So if that's not the case, then can we say it's not the case? And what is the expected new date to put this new plaza in service? And then on the flip side of that, I guess, is why can't it be an earlier date, and it would be a later date if the answer is no, it can't be before July 1st. So I guess there's two questions in there, and
A couple of what ifs too, also.
So let's start with the what if about the budget then. How do we deal with the budget issue, Mr. Mayor?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I will do my best, but I'll look for others to support me if required. The project will not be completed by July 1st, and that's a joint decision with the BIA and staff. The project has increased in scope slightly in terms of features that were not thought of or not considered in the original proposal, and through the good partnership with the BIA, hoping to accomplish their goals, and through our staff's expertise, they've landed on a design that they're comfortable with. There still is an opportunity to have some public input as well. So that's the timing component of it. Through that consultation process, the project is more complicated than anticipated. The budget numbers here are estimates, and as we're quickly realizing through a number of projects, when we do estimates, when we go to tender, sometimes we're surprised by the results. So that there is an estimate of about $20,000 to $30,000 over budget, which the BIA has graciously agreed to help fund, and we appreciate their support in that. Having said that, we don't know what the final number is until we go to tender, until we've got that hard number. We don't know exactly what that number is. So with the BIA saying we'll fund 20 or 30, that may cover it. It may be too much. It may not be enough. So this is a municipal project. We'll go through the municipal steps that we do. Council, we will issue a tender for it, and we'll report back to council. But just finally, we are working very closely, and we appreciate the support with the BIA.
Good. Is it fair for me to ask then that we manage this project to completion with all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and the budget approvals and the RFP and the construction work, so that it's a completed project in the fiscal year 2017?
You, Mr. Mayor, if council approves the budget, and if other projects don't crop up to take staff off this, then yes, we're very confident in that.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. One, through you, first of all, to the Director of Public Works. There's a notation here about removing an existing barrier curb and replacing it with a mountable curb. Would this be one of the first times we've done that in a fairly high traffic area? Like, is this something that could happen in other areas, or is this kind of a one-off? Because certainly it's a different kind of curb structure where, there's potentially a lot of traffic. Is it a new standard that's okay in public areas? And I have a second one too, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mountable curb, we see it in a lot of residential subdivisions, so it's that curb that is the same through a driveway. You don't have the raise. The reason to do it here is to make it more accessible, so strollers and that. It would be used only in areas where you want that ability, so we wouldn't see it coming down Goddard Street or other places to keep the snowplows on the road and keep cars on the road that way. So this won't be a new standard everywhere else, but where it's appropriate.
Thank you. And through you, perhaps to the Director of Community Services, two questions. One of the reasons behind imagining this space, and they're pretty drawings and some interesting features, but one of the reasons was really to open up the space so that there was greater potential for ground space. what I can't tell from the way that the drawings are drawn, now that there's, it looks like, you're removing raised planters, but it appears to be a permanent stage area, and then this water feature that's talked about, it looks like it takes up a lot of space. Are we actually gaining any space on the ground, or is it still, the expectation that whenever anything is really expected to draw a few people, it would be about the road being closed? Because it looks like we haven't gained much space with the construction. And then I have a second part too. So
yeah, we have gained additional space because the planters are portable, so we can certainly move those. The staging area is not raised, so it's maintained at flush level. Although we've had some discussions about raising it, conversations between BIA and the municipality realize that if the stage is to remain flush level, then it's programmable space as well. The area where the water features are considered, those are actually programmable space as well. So those can be utilized during the flea markets that vendors could be set up in those areas. And the timing can be controlled when the water features are activated and when they're not. So the entire area is all programmable space.
thank you for that. On the drawing, it does say raised stage area, so I appreciate you clarifying that. I am curious to know why, water features are great. Of course, there's an additional maintenance and operational costs associated with that, which of course we don't have any information about. But I'm curious to know why you would put that at the west end of the space and not closer to the street. I'm just curious why that decision was made, because in terms of a feature, it's a nice feature, but I guess I thought it might have greater impact at the other end. So what was the reasoning behind shifting it to the west end as opposed to the east end?
I might be better suited to answer that question, and the reason is simple. Water features typically draw children. Keeping children away from a provincial highway and closer to the rear of the area, I think for safety reasons, is likely the smart spot to put it. Also, the idea with a plaza is to draw people in to the plaza, not have them just walk by. So the water feature at the rear of the plaza is there for safety and obviously to draw people in to spend time in the space.
Then as a follow-up question, it's described on the drawings as a water fountain. When you say it draws children in, are we talking about a third splash pad here?
No.
Because
if you,
the intention is not to let people play in it, right?
Well, I mean, I'm not about to tell anyone what to do, but I have attached a sample photo that you might want to reference. We've also been in contact with the folks. This picture is taken in Blue Mountain Village outside the Fire Hall Pizza, and so we have already been in contact with staff and the folks at Blue Mountain to learn a bit about the feature. So it isn't by any means a splash pad. God forbid I would use that term in this room, but it's flush with the ground, exactly. So it's there's likely going to be some kids running through water on a hot summer day, but it's certainly there for aesthetic as well as a spot to encourage people to stop, spend some time, and enjoy themselves.
Thank you, Jeff. I think Councillor Mike Myatt would question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just attended my first BIA board meeting recently, and Jeff, I just want to say, and I've said this to you before, to the board. I see things like the farmers market, and new street lighting, and new trees, and improved landscaping, and downtown revitalization, A1, and I keep hearing those comments from a whole lot of people saying that the Port Elgin downtown is being revitalized. I just want to thank you and your board for. You in particular, you've done a lot of great work in the last 5 years. And I know you're going to give credit to your board, and I understand that. But there's a lot of really good things happening in downtown Port Elgin right now. I did have a couple of questions, Jeff, and one of their CAO too. Jeff, the number of point of clarification, the number of stores in downtown Port Elgin. How much is there a lot of vacancy in downtown Port Elgin right now? How many empty stores do we have?
Yeah, I can't be 100% certain, but I'm certainly quite certain that there are no vacancies. So we don't have any empty shop fronts downtown.
Probably should have asked the question, are we still full? I
Yeah.
guess.
It's been, there's been a
So-
busy streak
So
there for sure.
there are some good things happening, and this project down in Calder Park, I think is a wonderful project, and this council, supported it. I think it was $145,000, I believe, for Calder Park at last December's budget, and I think it was pretty unanimous around this table that we support a venture of this nature. And I look forward to seeing that project completed. I have a question for David. It goes out to tender, I suppose, in May. I would think it would go to tender thereabouts. I'm just wondering, when the prices come back, will we see like a staff report with a recommendation how that $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 higher than what the project was supposed to be? Are we going to see a recommendation from staff how that may be funded, and will it include, and I heard you say earlier that BIA approved, I think the motion's 208.
Yes, it is.
Whether or not they'll approve the expenditure. And so if BIA approves $5,000 per year for 4 or 5 years, that obviously be worked into the business plan, David. Like if the project was budgeted for 145 and goes in 180, we're still short, then you're going to, so that's going to be factored in, obviously. So the tenders go out in May. When will we receive the staff report? Is it June? And just the funding model. Are you anticipating this is where some of the support's going to come from?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor. When we met this morning to talk about the timing, we thought May or June would be the right time to go out for tender. When the results come back, we will be presenting a report to Council. Hopefully at that time, and I'm confident we'll have lots of dialogue with the BIA. Staff will be recommending a funding methodology, which will include, we suspect, some contribution from the BIA.
Thank you, Jeff. Mike. And thank you, John. Thank you very much for... So the next item on our agenda then is a Environmental Services and Transportation staff report, and it has to do with weed control, and our Director of Public Works, Amanda Frosch, will present it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the weed control policy is being brought forward to make sure that it is described and documented for staff, council, and the public. It is what we currently are doing to control weeds in our township. For our guide rail system, it's a non-selective spray that kills everything around the guardrails, keeps them safe. But for the other areas along the roadside, it is selective spraying. So we use a chemical that doesn't kill the grass. And then on an individual basis, it depends. The chemical is used depending on the plant and the location, and it's done based on the regulations. Those are mostly done through the SRM. So when somebody calls and reports giant hogweed or Phragmites, then that is treated where it's possible. It also includes the waterfront, and we work closely with community services to treat the Phragmites when we can. There's special windows and regulations when it comes to water. We don't go onto private property and spray, so this policy is specifically to lands owned by yours. Anybody has any questions?
Thank you, Amanda. So the recommendation is that Council approves the weed control policy as presented. Questions? Councillor Minaj.
So this is difficult. There was a newspaper letter to the editor from Yajah von Heeman last year where town staff had gone along the waterfront and had sprayed for some of the weeds that we're talking about here. And she listed a number of beautiful what are wildflowers and could be, so I understand the difference between the weeds and the wildflowers, I think, but it looked like we had taken a paintbrush or blanket approach and had taken out all the weeds and the wildflowers, and she was extremely upset. And I took it upon myself to say that at the next earliest opportunity, I would ask, through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, that somehow, some way, we find a way not to wipe out all the beautiful wildflowers that she takes beautiful pictures of and displays them, and find a way to work with her and others like her. If a subcommittee needs to be formed, if some other method needs to be undertaken, how do we protect the beautiful flowers that are different than the weeds along our waterfront trail that is enjoyed by so many?
I think you can take that back to our weed applicator and you can take that into consideration. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity fairly regularly to talk to Steve about weed control in the municipality, and he's an impressive man. He kills weeds and runs the cemetery, so he deals with death fairly regularly, and does it with a good humor, and he does a great job, I think, generally in controlling the weeds in Saugeen Shores. And I think, though, that and what Councillor Minaj just raised there is a good example of why I support this, obviously, but why I would like to see us go maybe a little bit further at some point when staff is able to do so, and basically do what we did with beach maintenance with weed control, and establish a policy, a broad policy, maybe a bylaw. I'm not sure what the best approach would be, but that clearly lays out what our approach to weed control will be in all parts of the municipality. How on our trails, what will we do? On our waterfront, what will we do? Here's the weeds we're going to control. We've got this Phragmites issue. I, for one, would really like to see us be able to apply glyphosate by air over water, which is something that may create some consternation with the public, but which is absolutely necessary to preserve our waterfront habitats in this community. So I think, though, that we should have policies that say what our approaches will be and what our approaches might be, so that we can then say, we can give Steve something to work with, so he can, when he goes out and does this, and he hears from a member of the public, I don't like what you're doing, he can say, look, here's the policy, it's passed by council, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and if you have difficulty with it, go to council, and council will discuss whether or not it's the community's interest, or it's whether it's the right thing for the community or not, and they may or may not change it. But I would really like to see us give that tool to our staff in a much broader way. This really only deals with our roadsides and areas under public works control. I think we need something more broad that deals with our parklands and our waterfront and all public lands. And then we can really give something to the public to say, here's what we're going to do, here's why we're doing it, here's how we're going to do it. And I think that'd be great for both the public and for our staff. So I guess I ask for that at some point when staff is able to achieve that. I don't know if staff has any comments about it, but that's where I'd like to see us go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I have a couple of questions with regards to the policy, and it may already be in the policy, but when it comes to rural roadsides, I know that there's a comprehensive spraying program both for guardrail and ditch areas, and I can certainly appreciate that there are different variations of Roundup and 2,4-D which are used to, in a more or less selective way. I'm not sure there's any that would achieve what Mr. Minaj is requesting, that are that selective that they can take out the weeds and not kill the flowers. But anyway, I know that when there's about to be spraying commencing, there's a notice goes out in the newspaper, and the public gets a notice that there's going to be spraying over a certain number of days. But within the municipality, we have a number of farming facilities which are certified organic, and there may even be other reasons that people who live in the country may or may not want to see certain herbicides used in proximity to their crops or livestock or so on and so forth. So my question is, through you, Mr. Mayor, is there a process whereby the public can make a request for an exemption, either filling out a form or calling a hotline or indicating some way or other why that their property or their frontage on a municipal road would be passed over or exempted from spraying.
There is, and it's included in the policy there on the second paragraph. The last, if an individual homeowner requests the town not spray the right of way in front of their property, staff will respect that request. Okay. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. One of the lines in your report, number 5, says that the town will advertise in local newspapers each spring to remind landowners of their own responsibility to help control noxious weeds. The policy, is very much about probably the more rural parts of the province. I would just want to encourage you, whenever you can, to, if we notice something growing in town, that we find ways to, let people know what it is, that it's bad, and, how to get rid of it. And, I look at some of the things that are on this list of 25, and some of them are pretty close to town, and some of them look pretty, so you can almost imagine somebody might end up with them in their garden and think that that's okay, but, then they have 5,000 seeds that last for 30 years in the ground. And I just was reminded of a couple of years ago, and the Director of Community Services might remember this. Somebody, all very good intentioned, planted a few things alongside the rail trail, and they were very invasive plants. Looked pretty in the spring, smelled nice in the spring, but would have very quickly taken over a big area. And certainly, there was a little flurry of activity between a couple of us, the town and the Rail Trail Association, and with some education to property owners abutting the trail. So just if you ever find opportunities to at least give people an identification. And comes to mind that Councillor Grace and I were at something recently that Frank Burrows and a couple of other people from the town were there, and even Phragmites is hard to identify. Some people, don't see the difference between it and some ornamental grasses, but once somebody explains, the width of the leaf and how it feels, you start to realize this is bad, this is good. So there's a comment in here about education or advertising. I would just encourage you, wherever possible, to go a little bit further, to be more proactive in the more urban areas, perhaps, than what the policy really is set out to address. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you for the second opportunity, Mr. Mayor. I guess after listening to the discussion, I might come to realize that it wasn't only about spraying; it might also be about cutting, and how much we cut along the North Shore Trail from Port Elgin to Southampton, and the waterfront. So what I would like to know is, until we're sure of our best practices, until staff is absolutely sure that could we invite people like Yaja von Heeman to come in and make comment and explain her side of the story? Can we put a moratorium on the waterfront trail for cutting and spraying until we know for sure that we're doing the right things at the right times? Thank you.
We need to be in compliance with the Provincial Weed Control Act. We cannot ignore that. That's what this is about, is noxious weeds. We're in violation of a provincial legislation if we don't. So I think a moratorium is not going to work. We have some responsibilities under provincial legislation, and that's really all we're doing here. We're not spraying everything. We're responding to the noxious weeds. I think we've got a pretty good policy here to deal with them. And I would say no. Also, these are trained applicators that put this stuff on. Their license through the Act, so they're following all provincial legislation, understanding what we can do. So I think we've had a good discussion on this. I'm going to call the question then. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda then is a planning and development staff report, and it has to do with policy in poultry, poultry in urban areas. And that's okay. The general nature. Yeah. Is it financial or? It's financial. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Our Development Coordinator, Jay Posner, will present this report.
So further to the March 20th meeting at which committee provided its direction on the major component pieces of a bylaw to regulate chickens in urban areas, we have attached the draft bylaw based on that discussion. So it highlights registration of chickens, lot requirements, hen requirements, coop and maintenance requirements, as well as enforcement provisions. Following that general discussion, staff were led to have sufficient information that we could also initiate a zoning bylaw amendment because that is where the general prohibition to limit chickens exists in the urban areas. And so this chicken bylaw is being presented, and we're proceeding through a zoning bylaw amendment process to remove that prohibition should this bylaw be approved. I've also highlighted a couple other features I'm just going to briefly mention that if we're treating this as a pilot program, so from the time it's adopted for 2 years, the staff will work with OFA and OMAFRA to educate the public on how chickens can be kept and cared for in this setting. And that will also study sort of the impacts that we observe throughout the pilot program, so that when and if Council wishes to extend the bylaw or to revise it, there'll be sufficient information to make refinements as needed.
Thank you. Then the recommendation is that Council consider the attached bylaw regulating the keeping of hens in urban areas at a future Council meeting. Questions, comments? Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So after a lot of contemplation and consideration, I believe that there's some key elements to this plan that are important going forward, that it is a pilot project, and that if it's a pilot project, then it should have a lot more, it should have additional requirements to be met by us, so that we know that the right things are happening out there, so that we can say with certainty to the public that this is a good thing to do. So I felt that we could do some more with the proposed bylaw, and so instead of I could speak to it, or I could offer it to you as an amendment, and then I guess I could speak to it.
Been moved by Councillor Minaj and seconded by Councillor Ritz. Amendment to bylaw being a bylaw to regulate the keeping of hens in the town of Saugeen Shores. New section number to be determined. Inspection. After the owner has successfully met the registry requirements and before the hens are obtained, an inspection of the coop will be conducted by the chief building official or qualified delegate and by law enforcement officer or qualified delegate. Upon successful completion of step 1 above, the owner and coop will be listed in the registry as approved for use. Next section says hen requirements. All hens shall have one wing clipped. 8 says a new subsection, number to be determined. A failure to comply with the provisions of this bylaw could cause disqualification of the coop owner from the registry. Disqualification from the registry requires coop owner to remove hens, food, and manure and complete a thorough cleaning before a final inspection is administered. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I felt that the bylaw as it was being presented needed a step to say we have other communities, their best practices are you submit a photograph of what you're going to design. It's almost like a building permit requirement to build a coop, and that really our wording didn't have anybody that I could tell actually going and saying the coop met all the standards that we have listed. So we've listed a lot of standards, but nobody was actually going to see that it was going to meet. So this is an onerous step on staff, but because it's a small sample, because it's a pilot project, it may only be 2 or 3 requirements to go and inspect at this time. Do I think that that's something that needs to be done in the future if we have 100 people applying or to be on the registry? No, I do not. I think at this time, because it's a pilot project, we should at least be making sure we have our I's dotted and T's crossed on this matter. So obviously, after they've been out there, that they're saying, yeah, the owner's met all the requirements, and we can not only say that they're legally okay to be on our registry, we're approving the coop for use, which is an important step, and I didn't see that in the language that we had. And finally, the final 2 pieces are, and I was questioned by Cheryl here about the clipping of wings, and I noted that it's the best practice in other communities. In the event that a door gets left open somehow and a chicken escapes and it's able to fly, it would provide consternation for the neighbors' dogs and cats and everything else that might take place. So clipping of the wing enables the owners of the chickens in the coop area, if one gets out by mistake, to be able to successfully control and rescue that said hen or chicken. And lastly, I felt that we needed to have some provisions in the bylaw that could say that, you know what, nowhere does it really say, and I guess it's always implied, if you don't meet the intent of the bylaw, that we can pull your registry. So I thought I would actually say that, so that everybody knows up front that failure to comply means disqualification. And then finally, if you're disqualified, we don't want you leaving the coop and the ensuing hens, the food, the manure, and anything else that goes on. And we've talked about cleaning, so let's at least, if you're disqualified, let's at least put this back to a clean facility. So that's why I've added this. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're speaking to the amendment here. Councillor Mike Myatt.
I have no comments on the amendment, Mr. Mayor. Speak later.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that the first section of the amendment would make sense to me, with the exception of the requirement for 2 staff members to do the inspection. I'm not sure that I could see that would be necessary. Oh, you did? Okay, I'm sorry.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. The deletion that everybody has in front of them is for number 3. I deleted the subsequent inspections. They don't have that deleted. You didn't read that out. So it's point 3, 2 subsequent inspections. It's already addressed in the bylaw recommendation.
Councillor Grace.
Just a clarification. I knew that number 3 was deleted. I was referring to the inspection of the coop will be conducted by the chief building official or qualified candidate and the bylaw enforcement officer or qualified candidate or delegate. So I was saying I didn't know why it would be necessary to have 2 staff members do the inspection.
So, any others? We'll deal with this amendment now. Any other discussion on the amendment or questions? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I just want to ask perhaps someone who knows more about chickens than I do. I understand this idea of clipping a wing means that there's a little more control over the whereabouts of where a chicken can go. Is that any way, does it have any kind of impact on the laying of eggs? Like, is there any trauma to the bird when this happens? I'm just curious. I just don't know.
I don't know a lot about chickens, but the one thing about the clipping of the wings is that, as far as I understand, then you can't show the bird at a local fair. So if at Pumpkin Fest or whatever, if you wanted to show the bird, you wouldn't be able to. That would be the only real restriction that I would that if people were interested in showing the birds, though, that we might want to open it up. So I don't.
So, any other questions to the amendment? I'm ready to call the question then. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? That fails then. So we go back to the main motion.
Main motion? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you bear. Yeah, if you bear with me for a few minutes, Mr. Mayor. I've spoken to well over 100 people about this issue now since last November. I had about 10 comments passed on to me right after I opposed it back last November, and that number's grown to over 100. And I've been opposed to allowing backyard chickens, Mr. Mayor, since this topic was first introduced, and I'm still opposed. In my view, backyard chickens do not belong in an urban setting. I believe we're trying to bring rural to the urban. I think raising of chickens belong in a rural setting. I think, so I do believe with the people I've talked to that there is a silent majority of people out there do not support backyard chickens. I think Patrick Jellison said it best in his letter to the media back on October 25th, 2017, when he stated, and I quote, "What is it that our hard-working chicken farmers aren't giving you? Is it $2 a dozen too much? Is $4 from local gate too much? What value do you bring raising eggs in your backyard within an urban boundary? What's your cost?" he asked. What else could that apparent disposable income be better suited for? And I heard about inspections tonight, staffing. One person going out, two persons going out. I think we're heading in the wrong direction with this one. Mr. Jellison goes on to say, if backyard poultry are permitted, be sure to follow good biosecurity practices to prevent the transmission of diseases like avian influenza. There's a speaker here tonight, and I firmly believe that the speaker this evening that talked about looking to be a good caretaker of raising chickens, she would absolutely do a 100% good job with that. However, what about those other chicken raisers that don't do a good job in backyards? Mr. Noda, Mayor, that I noted that avian influenza can and does happen. You say, why do I head down that path? Pretty far-fetched, eh? Well, in fact, over the past 2 years, 2 outbreaks have occurred in the province of Ontario, one in St. Catharines and second in the city of Woodstock, where all chickens within a 25-mile radius had to be destroyed. Mr. Jellison, incidentally, Mr. Jellison is Zone 2 Director with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, a resident of Saugeen Shores, a lamb and cod producer. He knows what he's talking about. Went on to say in his letter that odor and fleas need to be addressed with proper manure management, while feed should be stored securely to avoid infestations of rats and mice. This is Mr. Jellison. I've heard this from a lot of residents as well. I echo these thoughts. I am concerned about neighbor disputes, genuinely, and I'm concerned about our bylaw enforcement officer spending too much time enforcing this bylaw when his time could be spent on more important issues. I don't think anyone around this table looks forward to the day that a household cat or dog is attacked by a fox or other wild animal trying to access the hen house. Call them scare tactics. Call them what you wish, but there is a serious side to this. Let's take a look at a few items within the bylaw. A lot must be a minimum of 1,000 square meters. Why are we putting this restriction on it? If we are serious about passing a poultry and backyard policy bylaw, open it up. What are we afraid of? Why are we putting 1,000 square meters on it? It's eliminating those families with a 50 by 100 lot that maybe want to raise chickens in their backyards, but they can't because we put 1,000 square meters. You have to have a lot 80 by 125. Is that fair? I don't think it's fair. So we received one application, I believe, might have been 2, request back last fall. So we have a request, so we bring a bylaw forward to allow poultry in backyards from one request. And maybe there was, I heard of one. 1 or 2 applications, in my view, if there are, if this is approved, and I would encourage this council to not support this. If there are 1 or 2 applications, 1,000 square meters, over a 2-year period, are we really going to get an accurate analysis of how this thing works with 1 or 2 poultry applications in backyards? One of the articles talks about regular cleaning of chicken coops. Who will monitor this? A bylaw enforcement officer, correct? People have good intentions, but good intentions can lead to smelly backyards. The smelly backyards can lead to unwanted predators like rats and mice, and unwanted predators like fox, raccoons. The coyotes in my backyard. Matter of fact, I'd take my bird feeders in a year or two ago because my wife would be upset when I mentioned this in the air tonight, but I did have rats because of the feed. Got rid of them. Ask this question, is this bylaw really worth potential aggravation? Should the raising of chickens be left to our local farmers? I do believe so. I also believe a letter from local resident Jim Klein sums it up. It's on your agenda tonight. And I quote from Mr. Klein's letter. I hope you will take very seriously the letter in the Shoreline Beacon News from Patrick Jellison. He is an expert in this field. He asks many questions what many members of our community are asking. This is a quote. What about rats, mice, and other large predators? What about the smell when a neighbor is entertaining at an outside barbecue? These concerns are very real, Mr. Mayor, and the 100 people I spoke to share these same concerns of Mr. Klein. I spoke to a chicken farmer about raising chickens in an urban setting, and it's my nephew, by the way. In a comment, he caused me to stop and think twice about his idea, and I quote, I don't think people think about the dead stock. Chickens are not the healthiest, do not rebound from sickness as fast as other farm animals. What will urban chicken raisers do with dead stock? I know it's dealt with in the bylaw. I understand that. It's a question of a chicken farmer, and I believe we should all be concerned about these questions. He went on to say, beware of chickens attracting not only rats, but other animals getting into the hen house.
Mike, I don't want to cut you off, but I think we've heard... I think we've... Okay.
I'd like to close.
Okay, go ahead, please.
One paragraph. There are over 400 municipalities in the province of Ontario, and less than 10 municipalities allow backyard poultry that I could find. Midland, Collingwood, Shelburne, Barrie, Toronto, Ottawa, Orangeville, Thunder Bay, Pembroke, London have all recently turned down requests for backyard chickens. And I know this view works one community. Maybe it will work in another community. Not all communities are the same. For many of the same reasons and concerns I've stated this evening, I ask for council, please do not allow this to happen. Backyard chickens are simply not a good idea. I think they belong in a rural setting, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Rich.
Thank you, through me, Mr. Mayor. I did as well read Pat Jillison's letter to the editor in the Shoreline Beacon, so I called him, went over and talked to him. His concern, as he basically states in the letter, is that he wants to make sure that there's good regulation around it to make sure that there aren't any problems. So that's why he raises some of the risks. But if you ask Pat personally about it, he'd say he wouldn't have any problem with backyard chickens in the urban setting as long as it was properly done. On the one side, with Councillor Matt, I think I see what he's saying, but on one sentence we're talking about the spread of avian flu, and then the next time we're saying, oh, there's only 1 or 2 people that are actually interested in having chickens. So 1 or 2 people with chicken coops is not going to cause avian flu. Change is hard. Change is difficult. It always is, even in the smallest thing, like backyard chickens. But when I came on here, one of the things that I said was I was going to try and help people achieve their goals and try and make this a better community. So the whole idea is, if you want to do those kinds of things, you want to start with the word yes. You want to say, you know what, let's try something new. Let's do something. If someone wants to come forward with an idea, I say, yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can do something in this community that's a little bit different. And that attitude, I believe, will permeate through everything that I do on council, whether it's with regard to an aquatics facility, whether it's with regard to recreation in this community, whether it's with regard to helping economic development in this community. I want to start with the word yes, and I want to try and help people to be able to achieve their goals. We can spend our time and try and find problems with almost everything that comes forward. We can say, don't do this. We don't want to do this because of this reason and that reason. And if we choose to go down that path, then we will never accomplish anything. All I'm looking at is running a 2-year pilot to let a few families in this community raise a few hens for poultry. Catherine Martenko made several arguments this evening as to why that's a good thing to do. So I'm going to encourage you all to support this bylaw. so we can give these people the chance to try it, and we can feel like we've done something positive and good.
Thank you. I think can we go ahead?
One is just for the clerk, 8.1 in your proposed bylaw, I think it should read bylaw enforcement officer or police officer. The word by is missing there, just as an edit. I had a question, though, perhaps for you, to the clerk as well. Our zoning bylaw doesn't allow this sort of thing. So in the event that there was no bylaw here, is it possible for somebody to apply for a variance? Is that a potential avenue that someone could explore if there was no bylaw? Or is, because they apply for a reduced setback, they apply for increased height, and it's a variance. Is this something that would fit into that kind of thing if there was no bylaw? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I probably should check with the county planner before responding, but it is a provision of the zoning bylaw. Zoning bylaws can be amended through planning applications.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a quick question, and I guess this probably would also be for our clerk, or perhaps for Jay. Since this is a pilot program, if it is to be passed tonight, could we have some kind of acknowledgement? Are you planning on having something in the registration process so that participants would say, yes, we realize this isn't permanent, because it is an investment if they're putting money into chickens and a coop and that kind of thing, and what happens to that if we decide not to maintain the program?
Yes, there'll be, over the next month, there will be an education period, and we will be letting people know that this is a pilot project, and there will be an application process made up and a flyer made up to go along with this to kind of close the envelope so that people understand what they're actually getting into, and that it has a duration.
Councillor Minaj.
I'm disappointed that the amendment didn't pass, and I wanted to support the project based on an amending motion. So would you take a motion to defer, because I believe that there's enough extra talk that's taken place at the table here tonight, that we could come back. I feel like it's going to get defeated if and I don't think that that's fair. I believe that Councillor Rich has made a strong point in saying that it's a chance, it's an opportunity for the future for people in this world to do things differently than the norm, and some of the rhetoric got blown up a little high tonight. So I wondered if we all calmed down, took a breath, and came back in a couple of weeks with a revised thinking document, that it might have a better chance.
A motion to defer, if you get a second, I'll take it for sure, but I think what we need is some direction for a reason to defer, because this is about the third time that we've discussed this issue around this table, and I don't think deferring it another 2 weeks is going to get any closer to consensus. I can almost guarantee you that. This is an issue that I think is probably ready for the question and right away, but it's up to committee. But if you were a motion to defer, I want a specific reason. We've discussed this 3 times. We've got to deal with it. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I just wanted to point out, Mr. Mayor, that if it were to pass this evening, the matter would return to regular council in 2 weeks. So it was not a final passage tonight, obviously. That if you wanted to reintroduce different ideas or new amendments at regular council in 2 weeks, that would be possible to do. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Briefly, Mike, please.
It's okay, Mr. Mayor. If, I just was going to make a request, encourage this council to turn this down, but I would ask for a recorded vote.
Okay. So we're ready for the vote. I'll ask the clerk to conduct a recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the recorded vote will be called out in alphabetical order. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau?
Yes.
Councillor Grace?
Yes.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber?
Yes.
Councillor Matheson?
Yes.
Councillor Minaj,
Yes.
Councillor Mike Myatt,
No.
Councillor Rich,
Yes.
Mayor Smith. That motion carries.
So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, if I can get it up here, which is communication petitions for, oh, we better get, the next item on the agenda is communications petitions for committee of the whole information. There's 6 items there. Oh, sorry, 9 items. Any questions or comments? If not, then we'll move on to report of department heads, and we have 6 again this evening. And the first one, I don't know if anybody has any particular, does anybody want to present on any of these, to speak to them, any department head? If not, we'll just take questions. How's that? Any questions? Councillor Minaj.
I have questions on 2 and 3, Mr. Mayor. So let's start with the master plan road update. I guess my question is centered around stoplights and traffic circles. So at what point did we learn in the province that traffic circles were an economic benefit over a traffic light? That they're safer, and yet here we have another stoplight being recommended to be introduced. So how do I challenge that, Mr. Mayor? How do I ask why a traffic light here and not a traffic circle? That's part one. The second question is, there's no question in my mind that this particular spot in the winter months has caused more chaos and confusion when driving than any other spot. Highway 21 closing notwithstanding, that particular stretch of Bruce Road 25 is the worst stretch of road that we've got probably in our community for weather. Is there an opportunity to add to this development trees in the and price it in and put trees in now that says that as this road is changed in this particular open area, that we will put that living snow fence in place? So I've got 2 questions, looking for 2 answers. Why can't we have a traffic circle? And I guess that's part B to that is, are traffic circles cheaper and safer, or are they not? And if they are, why aren't we using one? And what about the trees for the weather protection?
Do you want to speak to it, Amanda? I think I can speak to the trees. The trees would be something that would need to go onto private property here, so there's the issue with that. And to be effective, they really need to be on private property. They need to be back. There's the engineered standards to be back so far that make them. You'll see them all along Highway 21 on private property. The living snow fence. That's where they are most effective. That's where they put snow fences far back off the roads to be most effective. The other issue, I think you can probably talk about the roundabout. It may be in the design or may not be. It's not likely to be. I think part of the problem is you've got a 4-lane highway there, and it's a much different design for a 4-lane with. But you're much more nowhere than I.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I come from Waterloo. I'm home of the roundabout. So I say this mostly as a resident from there and not a traffic engineer, but a 4-lane highway going to a roundabout takes a lot of property. For this, there's already road widenings being considered to make it a 4-lane with the bike lanes. We did talk about it quickly with the county as to street lights or traffic lights versus roundabout. Detailed design is not done, but the idea of passing pedestrians and cyclists through the roundabout was the concern of the county. This intersection here is the two legs are county roads and 2 legs will be town roads. So we're taking the advice from the professional engineer. Signals versus roundabouts in this.
Okay, any other questions on any of those reports? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, if I could get your permission, I would like to go back one level. I just came in and you skipped over the information reports there a little bit, the previous section on
okay.
Section 5. If I could go back and just comment on one or one and a half of the items that are in there. In particular, it's the committee that I sit on, which is the Bruce Power Economic Advisory Committee. And I would just think it's worth pointing out some of the really exciting things that are going on in that committee. The Bruce Power is certainly taking great steps to be inclusive of businesses and include the counties, surrounding counties and municipalities with the spin-offs that are going to be forthcoming out of the refurbishment project. But two that are particularly exciting that I thought are worth pointing out are the one around the website that they've set up. So any businesses that have anything to do with newcomers to the area, whether it's accommodators or restaurateurs or real estate people or any of those types of things that a new person coming to the community might be interested in, Bruce Power is hosting a website, and you can put your information on there free of charge, and it's going to be promoted by Bruce Power when they hire new employees. So that's something that I think everybody should be taking advantage of if they can. And the second really exciting one is the partnership with the community colleges. So Bruce Power has gone out of its way, and in as much as they don't come right out and say they have a higher local policy, because they have to be viewed as, and they are quite employment equitable across the board and across the province and across the country for that matter, but they are certainly making it, trying to do as much as they can to promote what type of education that a young person would or should pursue if they have a desire to become a Bruce Power employee. So in this report, it talks about the partnerships with a number of colleges in the province, and in particular certain courses that are available, and it goes on to talk about a nuclear-specific qualification. So I think anybody who's watching at home or anybody who gets a chance to read this should really be directing your young family members along those lines. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much.
Did you want to speak to it? I think David wanted to add to that.
Thank you, and those are all excellent comments. I just did want to also credit the county. The county is a partner in all of this initiative. They're equally funding the initiatives going forward. So the programs and the things that the councillor has identified, absolutely 100%. They're very strong in their partnership through Bruce Power and the county. Just wanted to make sure the county got proper credit.
Thank you. Councillor Grace.
Mayor, I just wanted to compliment staff on the initiative taken in organizing the volunteer fair and the bicycle-friendly sessions that will be held in May. Thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was also going to comment on the Wednesday, May the 3rd event. It's a week from this Wednesday. It's more than just a volunteer fair. It's an opportunity for adults to see all kinds of ways to be involved in the community, because there'll be service clubs there and some other activity-oriented, more social kinds of things. So hopefully it'll have a good turnout and be an annual event that lets people connect with opportunities in the town. So it is about volunteering, but there's also going to be other opportunities there just to get involved. Thanks.
Councillor Mike Maya. Sorry, Councillor Matheson. I apologize for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's why your eyes went like that, Mike.
I just want to continue on what Councillor Mayette was alluding to. Just this past Saturday, Bruce Power, through Fanshawe College, hosted a welding symposium for the classes that they're holding in Tiverton. So our local youth who are interested in welding post-secondary, there's a college class being held in Tiverton where they can get their training. I'd like to speak or talk a little bit about number 3, the beach house. We see that the cost came in a little over budget. And I wonder if can go back to what Councillor Rich mentioned when this first came up, that maybe we should be putting this into phases, and to get something done that we really need is to expand our washroom facilities first, a little bit of storage, get that done so that we have it for the people at the beach, and then we can go on from there with the alternate or extra designs.
Yeah, my report this evening was really to bring you up to date with where we are, and in it indicates that we're exercising the procurement policy guidelines, and we'll be meeting back with the architect this week, and potentially with the lowest bidder, and those discussions may certainly come into play. It's early for me to predict right now until we have those discussions, but those certainly may be an option as we move this forward.
Councillor Minaj. Oh, sorry, have you done? No? Okay, thanks. Councillor Minaj again.
So I too want to speak about the Main Beach House, and it strikes me that we've run into a roadblock. And to coin a phrase from Councillor John Rich, we're trying to find a way to get yes here, to get to a yes, and give our community something we've been working on. At least I've been working on it since 2011 when I joined the Waterfront Master Plan Committee, and it was to make those necessary improvements. And I know and I remember people saying that $400,000 and $500,000 numbers were a little excessive for washroom renovations. We weren't only going to renovate them, we were going to make them meet the new standards. Full accessibility, family pods. We got feedback that said that we'd like to go to a 4-season consideration for the waterfront, where people are looking for a washroom when they're using the trails. And so we had to consider winterizing some of this. So all of these add-ons and additions started to move the price north, if you will. And so we wanted to double the size of the washrooms because we were getting into thousands of people coming to our beach on more than one day. There were, as the climate changes and the world gets hotter, we can expect more. So as more arrive, we need more facilities. And so Jane has, our Director of Community Services, Jane, has indicated that as we delay as well, I think she's indicating this, not only are we fighting a battle on the price tag is maybe too high, but it doesn't get any cheaper the longer we wait. So my answer is, and my question, I guess, to David and to Jane is simply this. What is it going to take, and how can we get to a completion of this project by the end of this year? And I'd like to continue on the theme that says, you know, there were options on this design that said we could include a restaurant area, and that means if you look into the future, we might be able to remove an existing restaurant from the Port Elgin Main Beach area, which would then include being able to offer more beach space and maybe even more parking. So this model is holding back the other development phases. So we're talking about phasing. We're already into phases.
I think you're making the argument of something that we're not discussing here. This is just an information report, Neil. There's nothing before us. So can you please summarize it?
I will summarize to the question then. Can I expect, is it reasonable to expect that staff will be able to bring this to fruition and completion by the end of this budget and fiscal year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and Jane, you can add on. That's not a commitment that I'm willing to make. It's a commitment that staff will definitely have a recommendation to council to make that decision. As the report indicates, we are working within the flexibility that we have within our purchasing bylaw to get the prices as low as we can. Jane has mentioned that she's meeting with the architect, I believe, tomorrow to look at options to make sure that we can deliver, I think, what council still wants, and then have the opportunity to decide whether they're willing to support it at that financial level. I can't commit that we're going to complete the project this year because I don't know what direction council will ultimately give us.
Thank you, David. So, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
It's about the refreshment vehicles. Just through you to the Director of Community Services. I note that Denny's Dam and the Chesley Street dock area didn't have any takers. Have they had service before?
I'm going to look to our clerk to answer that one.
Denny's Dam has had one refreshment vehicle license issued in the past, but not in the recent past.
Okay, and then my second question was the reference to sports parks. Then it goes on later on to just mention Cameron and Lakeview specifically. That doesn't enable them to go to Beaner or to Jubilee Park. It's limited to those two parks that are mentioned.
That's as per the request, and the sports fields are only limited to those that have washroom facilities.
Okay. And then my third question is, I'm curious to know if there's the potential to monitor the locations that seem to be a bit more permanently sited, the ones particularly at the Port Elgin Main Beach, where I'm assuming that they're hooking up to electricity. It would be good to have a sense at the end of the season just what that electricity cost was for those two elements. I realize that they're paying a little bit more for their leases, but with the price of electricity the way that it is, it's a $600 lease. It would be good to know that certainly that at least covered the price of the hydro. I don't know if that's possible, but I would welcome that kind of information after the season is over if it's available. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Rachel.
If I can just take a quick step back to communications just for a quick moment. There was the financial statement for Basra in there. I over that quickly. Basra did make a profit last year. You'll notice that we've got almost $2 million in the bank. That's something that we need to look at as we move down the road, because I think there's going to be changes to recycling legislation in the near future. 1. 2 was the economic development committee meeting. There's changes to the mandate there, and what we're going to do is focus on our new areas over the next few years and kind of revitalize that with initiatives on tourism, agriculture, and
I think that's something that's coming later, correct?
Is that right?
Yep. That's on council.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the other side, on the regular council too. Right.
Okay, you'll get a chance then. So, that's the end of our agenda. Motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Madison, all in favor? We're adjourned. We'll reconvene in 10 minutes, 9:02.